uncultivated arable land that can drive, according to Adesina, my brother, we can increase grain in our globally by up to 100%, maybe even 200%. We have the youngest population, the youngest global workforce in our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have what it takes to provide a solution for both decarbonization, taking the world into green industrialization, and also ensuring that we decarbonize everywhere globally. So those are the two things that we must focus our attention and be able to position our continent appropriately. And that's why I said earlier, we need a fit-for-purpose organization, and we need to fund the organization ourselves. You all know it is said, he who pays the piper calls the tune.
There you have it. He who pays the piper pays the tune. That is President William Ruto speaking in Gigiri on the 16th of this month during the AU media conference. And you can always chime in on this conversation as we continue. But then a quick reaction to what President William Ruto was saying. I'll start with you, sir. I don't know if you followed up on what he was talking about, his optimism on climate change as a country, as a continent, and even globally. What he says, pay the piper and all that, even as he welcomes other countries for the Africa Climate Summit.
Yeah, what the president has said is correct. It's a good thing to show the concern on climate change. But I personally, as an expert in ecological economics and the relationship between climate and environment and the socio and the economic part, is the way emissions have been being produced in the north in large quantities. And now that one is affecting us. And what we can do, it seems as if in the south we are helpless. We can plant trees there for adaptation and so on. But unless there is a change everywhere, and the behavior change from the north, south in combating climate change, we cannot move very far.
Right.
And about the piper, it's true, because initiatives in this part, we must sacrifice a lot in this part, and we require funding to do that, to change from one issue to another, for adaptation, for mitigation, and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
Tracy, how about you? Whatever the president talks about, and he is a man, by the way, who is quite vocal about climate change in the country. We've seen him even during the month of June in France, speaking largely about climate change. What do you make of his sentiments, even as he welcomes other countries for the Africa Climate Summit?
I do agree with Mr. Mureithi. Africa bears the biggest brunt in terms of receiving the most but negative effects of the climate crisis. And it's refreshing to see for the first time Africa banding up together, African leaders looking at this particular conference, summit that's happening in September, to finally take action, because the global north, yes, as much as they can take as much action as they want, if Africa, the ones who are receiving the most negative effects of the climate crisis, we need to work twice as hard, even more, for us to protect not only our diversity, but also our people.
Right. And the fact that we did mention about June, that particular summit, as it concluded, and even during this particular summit in Paris, the global financial pact summit, activists were really pushing for, and just to quote that, were really pushing for attacks on the fossil fuel industry and the other on financial transactions. This is basically to bring in more money for the climate change. As an expert on matters, economy, on matters even ecology, how will this really impact?
Yeah, what I can say, we require complete paradigm shift, because transiting from fossil directly to non-fossil is quite expensive in terms of technology, in terms of maybe lowering production and so on. So it will require financing. And that financing should be free from transaction costs, and it should be free from bureaucracy. We know there are some global financial mechanisms and transfer payments, previous arrangements, which have been put in place at the World Bank, what we call the GEF, but they are very bureaucratic. You make a proposal, you retire before it is funded. So those are the issues of concern, because there should be commitment. If we hear there is climate financing in this country, in the Treasury, I hear even some banks are connected to that. But, and a good article was written by one of the experts who have been working with the UN. He said accessing, preparing those project proposals, again, getting them funded is a nightmare. And something else which is much touted in this country is about the carbon credits. That one is full of transaction costs. Those people, you must get experts from abroad to verify those things, to get certification, and then they go and get the buyers, and they must get their fee, and so on. So what really reaches those people in the ground, in the group ranches, in the coast, in Taita, and so on, is minimal. And it's not it's not an incentive enough to make them confirm, to make them not to utilize those woodlands or to conserve them. So those are the key issues, that there should be funding which should be accessible, free from bureaucracy, and maybe free from high interest rates. Yeah, at least you hear this complaint where they say that we are charged a high interest rate when we borrow from the Bretton Woods institutions and so on. Yeah. So it should be fair, and sometimes climate resorts are not immediate. Right. So there should be very special financing with those vehicles for climate change, free from the last ones which are commercial and so on.
And these were talks that were there during the COP27 last year in Egypt, the fifth COP to be held in Africa. First and foremost, in your overview, how was the COP27 for you? And why are we still having, years later, we're still having, such kind of conversations? I remember even in COP27, even still in matters talks about payouts for damages, payout and damages, they were halted and postponed rather to 2024. Why still having, these conversations?
Yeah, I think it has taken too much time before those who have got finances or those who don't have to walk the talk. Yeah? That COP, there have been one COP from another one to another one to another one. I think it's the high time now there should be action. And I think that's why our president was talking as if he was impatient. It's because of that long history you have alluded to. Yeah. Nothing is happening, people are meeting, and they are generating even more carbon when traveling to those conferences, and probably even because of unsustainable consumption on food, maybe there's a lot of pollution to that and the other adverse effects. So it's the time to walk the talk, or never. Right. Yeah.
Tracy, I don't know if you got the chance to go to Egypt last year, or maybe Greenpeace. Did you?
Yes, Greenpeace was part of the team, but I wasn't specifically.
Hopefully this December you're going to Dubai. But then I'm pretty sure you followed up on what was going in COP27, even as the leaders were inside there. Activists, were outside really protesting about all this. Speak on how the COP27 was for you.
Yeah, as Mr. Mureithi has said, COP27 was yet another conversation. There was an army of over 600 fossil fuel agents there. How can we have 600 people being invited to COP27 who are, advocating for fossil fuels when we have more people who are in renewable energy, indigenous communities who are affected by this climate crisis, they are shut out. That is it's nonsense. That should not happen in the first place. As Mr. Mureithi has said, we need to stop having these conversations. We can talk and talk and talk as much as we want, but unless we have proper action. When the global north pays for loss and damage, we need to restore our forests, we need to revive our rivers, we need to improve agriculture in our countries, in Africa. Otherwise, we have no hope. As of Saturday, the climate clock for the first time ticked under 6 years. That means we only have less than 6 years to properly act on climate action, unless the effects become so devastating and irreversible.
Right. And even as you mentioned that, then that really paints a picture of how the road to COP28 now looks like in Dubai. We have, a few months to COP28, and even now before that, let's, really talk about the summit, the Africa Climate Summit. I believe this is going to be the first ever under, the UN. Is it UN or AU? AU, yeah, AU. How big of a deal, sir, is this for Kenya even to be hosting this in Nairobi?
Nairobi being one of the big centers of environment, the UNEP, and also the economy of the East Africa has got a vintage position to bring people to bring the African continent together to look at that one. Because I believe if every country is able to make some steps by itself, the way Kenya is trying to make steps on green energy in terms of geothermal, the wind energy, solar energy, and they put more incentive for people to bring those equipments which are not manufactured here and so on. It is a good step. And also it's a challenge to those who are capable and those who have got billions of dollars to see us in Africa, we are ready to sacrifice, and them, they are not immune to climate change. And I'm glad now, even in the north, there is a place where the temperature has been 56, 52 degrees centigrade. Mm-hmm. So this one now is a global issue. It's a global issue, it's not a Kenyan issue. So if Africa can try to beat a bit of sense to those people and also encourage them to come and invest this direction. Because why would you want to go manufacturing in the north, producing tons and tons of carbon while there is green energy around Okaria? If really those people are serious about climate change, they should transfer some of their industries here in Africa and maybe allowed Okaria, just like they transferred their industry to China because there was cheap labor. Right. Now it is a matter which is more serious. And I think this matter should be taken the way COVID was taken. Mm-hmm. If it was not taken the way it was taken globally, we were headed to extinction. Right. Climate change is leading us to a path of self-destruction, for those who know what they should do, but they are not doing.
Right. Yeah. And even as we talk about how serious this is, Tracy, and just to quote what the president had said, this summit will provide a platform to advocate for global alignment on a green growth agenda complemented by a transformative global climate finance compact. Here, really talks about global. And even, as you allude, talk about the goodwill. Is Ruto here too ambitious on this matter, having, a global finance compact?
No, not ambitious at all. In fact, he should even be more ambitious
than he is right now.
Okay. Because you see, Africa has the largest natural resource when it comes to providing renewable energy. We have an abundance of sunshine, we have an abundance of wind, we have water, and actually even to quote renewable energy, in Kenya, we produce over 70% of renewable energy, which is amazing, because even countries like South Africa, they're still, I don't use the word addicted, but they're still using coal energy. And these are some of the countries that need assistance in terms of climate finance. And as much as Ruto is being ambitious in terms of climate finance, it's also important as Africans to make sure we have that integrity and not let that money come and fall into another corruption scheme.
Right.
You know, because at the same time, yes, President Ruto is advocating for climate change, climate justice all over the world, hosting this amazing summit that is going to bring Africans together to finally take action from an African perspective, you know, as we ground African consciousness. But also the same president quite recently lifted the ban on logging.
Yeah.
So that's something else we need to look at. We have to make sure we uphold that integrity so that when that money comes and as we advocate for this money to come, we use it for the greater good, for the greater of our nature and our people, lest we move into a self-destructing, you know, system, as Mr. Mureithi mentioned.
Right. We'll get to that matters because I know, Mureithi, you're an expert as a forester. You're an expert on matters, you know, the logging and all that. But then, even as you say, the whole ambitious, you know, Ruto also says that we have the solutions, you know, to decarbonize. Just to, you know, quote him, Africa has what it takes to decarbonize. Do you agree? And I mean, okay, fine, we do have the solutions, but then how do we really impact on these solutions? Tracy?
Yeah, we do have the solutions. We are not short of African scientists, African experts, like we have one here. Okay. We are not short of the expertise to make it done, to make sure that we, you know, mitigate the impacts of climate change. We are not short of knowledge and expertise. What we need is that togetherness and making sure we come together as one and make things happen the right way. You know, if we want things to happen, we cannot keep on depending. There's this whole mindset in Africa that I'm glad we are moving away from it, that we need to be saved. We don't need to be saved. The Global North does not need to save us. The Global North needs to pay its dues, give us the climate finance, and our experts will carry on from there. And
it reminds me, you know, even the head of state saying that we need a whole self-reliance. Even as you come in, you know, chime in on what Tracy is talking about. A few days ago, we did see, you know, IMF approved a 20-month arrangement under the Resilience and Sustainability Facility, that is RSF, in an amount of about $551.4 million to support Kenya's ambitious efforts to build resilience, climate change, and catalyze further private climate, you know, financing. So we do have this money from IMF coming in to Kenya. How again do we utilize this money, sir?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe that sometimes we may rush fast to receive the money, which is not good. Mm-hmm. There is a principle known as form follows function. Let us think about what is the functions of this fund because it may come. Otherwise, we will start learning up and down. Like now, I am sure there is a good money which I see on TV sometimes, some tiny activities happening in the counties. I hear is climate funds. Mm-hmm. We should have correct programs, correct proposals, and we do appraisal of those projects we are proposing. We should look at them, we do economic appraisal, not only the financial of how much money is coming, how much money, what is going to be generated in terms of welfare from that money which is coming. Right. Is it going to have impacts on the local economy and so on? So I think we should be very serious. We make good proposals, good projects, so that they don't become white elephant and we are not in a hurry. Right. So that this money goes where it should be and it can be traced. And also there should be more transparency in the utilization of this fund. You can bring more stakeholders, maybe forming some very strong grassroots with the organic organizations there, right, and the counties and so on, and even the civil society, so that they can see really, we see money came from the World Bank, we can feed it, or GICO can feed it down there, right, do tiny irrigation, cope with the climate, and so on. But sometimes we hear big funds, and then from there it keeps quiet. Whether it comes or not, you don't know.
So kwa ground vitu zinakuwa different.
Hata hujui.
On that note, so allow me to take a short break. I can see a number of comments here. So someone says, I'm still wondering why African countries signed the Paris Agreement. We'll get to that and the whole importance since 2015 till now. Where are we on that? And also matters logging. You're watching Morning Cafe. We'll be right back. Remember, the hashtag is Morning Cafe at TV47 News, number 2047. Send in your feedback and questions. Right, welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe as we discuss matters climate financing. I'm here with Samuel Muridhi and Tracy Maheti. Is it Maheti or?
Maheti.
Oh, you really have to.
Yeah,
okay, my director says, I think you come from the same region, the Luyaland, maybe?
Very proud,
okay.
Yes.
Ruthi, before we took a short break, we were discussing the IMF, and just in case you're joining us right now, so a few days ago, the IMF approved a 20-month arrangement under the Resilience and Sustainability Facility, that is RSF, in amount of about $551.4 US. And you're really, debunking on this. But then how this figure really looks like a lot if you put it in Kenyan shillings. But is it enough, though?
If money becomes enough, there will be a problem, first of all.
Okay.
If you get enough money, you'll not come here tomorrow morning. So what I'm saying, it should become in phases. Money should come in phases. Then they work with that one and see what happens. And remember, there is one thing which cannot be done by foreign, by maybe like World Bank and even ADB. You may not receive, if you receive a lot of dollars at once, it may collapse your economy. Yeah? That's why even like that money cannot come straight to Kenya immediately. You may have a lot of dollars and your shilling comes back to 50 per dollar. Okay. Where do you sell your coffee? Yeah? You get a dollar inflation. So it's good, there's a way they release that money in bits, but the most important thing is to have clear projects with work plan, and then they can use what is being used by some organizations. It's known as result-based financing. You must really, you are financed because you are showing results, not, yeah? And
Okay.
also, environment is a difficult area. I said the returns are not seen. Some is long-term planning, so they require to move from the normal microeconomics taught in universities and now think about the relationship between environment, economy, the social, and the whole society. And it's another paradigm shift. But we have got expertise in the World Bank, hoping that they are going to guide when that money comes. But I would say that money be targeted and be transparent. Otherwise, that's money we are going to pay later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we now utilize this money? Do we have clear-cut structures as a country that we know after we really get this money, we have institutions to use this particular money to fight effects of climate change, Tracy?
Yeah, definitely. Utilization it will be difficult again if we do not have clear policies and structures put in place. But it's important that when this money comes, the government needs to work with grassroots communities and youth organizations. We know the future is in youth, and at Greenpeace Africa, we do have a whole program where we work with vulnerable youth, and these young people are really into ecopreneurship. We know that a lot of youth voices don't get heard, especially in the ideas. There's always this notion that they're not qualified enough or experienced enough to handle such projects. But as long as they have mentors and structures put in place, they have amazing projects. We've been working with a lot of young people from Nairobi North, and so far they've come up with amazing projects with just tiny micro grants. So you can imagine how amazing projects they can come up with good structures and more money in place.
And it's interesting, by the way, that right now the young people are really into climate change and all these talks of climate change. I don't know, Muriithi, do you, as you can see, as the Swahili say, makula chumvi, do you, the old people really feeling left out? The young people really, is it a good thing right now?
There are some figures which came out with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, which shocked me, that 80% of Kenyans are buying food. Where are they getting the money from? And why are they buying food? And if the youth is brought on board, they can produce that food. Light all the way, if you go to this town, the center of grains is Nyamakema, the beans and the pulses. They are coming all the way from Ethiopia. But in every climatic region, if the youth are involved, they can cultivate the land. Otherwise, land now in a very fertile land in central Kenya, western, is being left to the very old people.
Okay.
There is this young population, and they can be involved, they complain about climate change and so on. If there is some tiny, small irrigation projects, for example, and also marketing infrastructure, they can really get involved, and they can generate wealth for this country.
Right.
Otherwise, you get figures saying Kenya is an agricultural country. 80% of people are buying food, including me, including the one sitting in Kakamega or Nyeri. You get people carrying some vitugu, some tomatoes, and they are coming from the market, and they have got land there. So something is not working. It must be re-engineered, and this type of funds should address those things.
And speaking of something is not working, we'll get to that shortly. But then there's a question here. Penina asks, 22047, Penina asks, kindly ask the panelists, what is the climate policy in Kenya? I'll start with you, sir. Do you have anything like climate finance policy in Kenya?
What I know there is a climate policy in Kenya.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't really have anything like a climate finance policy?
Well, that one I'm not aware. And I am not aware about the climate finance policy, but I think there should be. There seems to be a bit of disconnect now with climate finance I don't know what policy is being followed, because we hear there is money and the banks have been brought about, but I don't know what is guiding that finance and so on. Maybe you are aware about the policy on climate financing.
Josie?
I do know that a few months ago there was deliberations in terms of the new climate policy, and there was a lot of backlash towards it because it was very constricting. But in terms of specifically climate finance, I am not aware if we have something up in place yet.
Right. So this actually talks that should be there, having policies specifically on climate finance to even regulate on how such kind of monies we're getting from IMF should be even used. All right.
No, I was just going to say definitely agree with you, and I do believe that that's some of the issues that will be discussed in the African Climate Summit in September.
Right.
Yeah.
There's something you had raised earlier, and I said we'd definitely get to that. But then before we get to the expert, the sharpest of minds about forests and trees and the whole logging, what is your immediate take when you heard President William Ruto had lifted the ban on logging in the country?
So, as someone who spent a lot of time petitioning for the government to not lift the ban, like a whole month before, I was very devastated when I heard that happen, because we do know that lifting the ban in place for the past 6 years has done good. Our forest coverage increased. Our tree coverage also increased. We started seeing life in our rivers. And given that the climate crisis is only getting worse, like we know that we experienced five failed rainy seasons in Kenya consecutively, might I add. And it was the worst drought in the past 40 years that's happened in Kenya.
Right.
So lifting the ban on logging just like that, I do believe it was a wrong decision made by the government.
Right. Even as you come in, your expertise on this, President William Ruto says that this will create job opportunities, but then on the other side, there's matters tackling climate change. This is a thin line that the president is walking, right?
Yeah. About the ban, I don't know why it's getting concerned now, because if I give the history of forest plantations, they are more than 100 years old in this country. They started with the eucalyptus and water, which were grown along the railway line because of the steam age in those days, Kijabi, Tiboroa, and so on. And later, more plantations were established in the state forest in terms of pine, in terms of cypress. The purpose was to produce wood. And I think it's important to understand the position of plantation and forest management, because we know if you take a big forest ecosystem like Mount Kenya or Kakamega Forest, it's usually divided, zoned in different areas. There's the protection area, which has got high biodiversity, like they are made to national parks. The next one, if not a national park, is a nature reserve. Then we have got the other areas which are not environmentally sensitive, and that's where the plantations are.
Okay.
And plantations play a big role in mitigation of climate change and adaptation, because those plantations, when well managed sustainably, they grow fast and they take a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. And then when sown into wood, sowing of wood does not produce a lot of emissions. Compare production of steel, which people are here saying that it's a substitute. To produce 1 ton of steel, whether from scrap or from the iron ore, produces a lot of tons of emissions of carbon. But with wood, that one does not have, and if it is for construction, it is stored in that wood for so many days. Like the veranda which you get there in Norfolk Hotel, how old is it? It has stored a lot of carbon. And other countries have realized, even scientists, that wood, even burning wood, is better than coal. And that is why, like Japan, I was there about 3 years ago, they are using old wood from demolished houses and elsewhere to generate green energy in terms of electricity. And also, when you see plantations, they are planted to be harvested. And there is what we call management plan made with the communities. Participatory manner is agreed. There is an environmental impact assessment. And there is standard operation procedure, what you do to a tree. Like now I'm holding this seed.
Oh, okay.
When you put it in the nursery, it is for 21 days.
Which
This is
okay?
Croton. I brought
okay.
because it's the biggest. So if you put this one in the nursery, we know it's 21 days. And then you transplant it to the container. Then you put it to the field. There is the spacing. Everything is prescribed until it will be 30 years. And then you harvest. Others are saying it's good to leave the wood rotting in the forest. Surprisingly, rotting of wood in the wild forest produces about 10.1 gigatons of carbon, about 115% more than fossil fuels. It emits a lot of carbon itself. So it's good to sustainably use wood. And also forests should not be managed for one purpose. Forests, those protocols are there from the UN, the East African protocols on forestry management, the FAO guidelines, ITTO guidelines. And sustainable forest management is about making a forest meet 3 criteria of the environment, the socio, and the economy. And that way there will be incentives to conserve those forests. And also it generates the employment, and also rural economy. It's one way to drive rural economy. It has been realized even in the developed world. Now they are using forestry for those remote areas, industrial development and other activities.
What I'm getting from you is that even as an expert on matters, forestry, you really support this, lifting of the ban.
But they ought not to have been there.
Okay.
Because trees have been grown for 100 years, and there is the cycle of that years, you cut. And even a question I would have expected people to ask is why 5,000 hectares, which the president said, is very clear why they are that. From the total area of plantation, 150,000 hectares, you divide them by 30, the time they reach to mature. And then every year you cut proportionally. 5 until it reaches 30, and the other time you are planting. So you'll have 1-year-old plantation, 2-year-old plantation, and the third one which is moving to give way now for the 0 one.
Right.
Yeah, so those ones are there. They are forest management plans, they are in the law, and forests are told they should be managed at a commercial basis, and that's the forest law.
Yeah.
The new one, there was the previous one, 205, and they repeated it there because they realized wood is more sustainable, it can create employment, but that area is restricted to the areas which are not environmentally sensitive.
Right.
They are low areas, they are not along river valleys, they are not swamps. That one was decided, and at one time some were in the wrong place, they were converted to indigenous.
Tracy, are you convinced that even as much as even the CS Environment Superintendent says that this doesn't affect indigenous forests, this is really for commercial plantations, but as an activist, are you convinced what Muchiri is saying?
Unfortunately, I'm not convinced at all. He mentioned history, and I would just like to read a quote from one of the first ministers for tourism, forest and wildlife, called Marianne Peter. He mentioned that the basic use of forest for the benefit of this country, this is Kenya, are more in terms of water conservation and the benefit that conservation makes to agriculture than actually the sale of timber. He continued by saying, timber sales will never justify environmental damage. Never. And this is one of the first ministers for tourism, forest and wildlife, just when the forest plantations before were started to be put in place. They have mentioned several things. Number one, sustainable use of forest resources, or rather natural resources. Yes, it is the law, it is the mandate by the government to use natural resources sustainably for the benefit of our people. But why does the government have to go for the most extreme measures? Our forests are barely the minimum requirement by the UN in terms of forest coverage. We are only at 8.83%.
Yeah.
And that is due to the ban being put in place for the past 6 years, because in 2018, when the ban was in place, we were at 5.59, if I'm not wrong, 5.59.
If you compare with other African countries, where are we? Because I remember the president, while speaking in France, with a multitude of youth, he was, boasting of how, as a country, we really have one of the, highest forest covers.
That is complete. That's a lie. No. In Guinea-Bissau, they have up to 70% forest coverage. Guinea-Bissau only. In Kenya, we are barely 10%. So many West African countries are over the 50% mark.
Right.
But then again, even them, the forests are vulnerable because the DRC government wants to auction oil blocks in Congo Basin Rainforest, but that's another story.
Okay.
And as you can see, we've been talking about sustainable use of forest resources. The government is going for the easy way out and the most destructive way out, which is cutting down trees. And we know that this didn't work. 6 years ago, it was put in place by the same President, William Ruto, who was then the deputy president. He's the one who mandated Tobiko to stop, to ban all forms of logging in all forests. But you can see right now, there are so many other ways that if it's truly about sustainably using our natural resources, there are other ways. There's a billion-dollar industry in terms of honey production that we can use. There's another industry in terms of selling seeds, seed crowning. Dr. Kalua speaks about it very highly, seed crowning. Instead, the government is, even in terms of our own seeds, our own indigenous seeds, the government is criminalizing the use of our own indigenous seeds and instead requires us to, use certified seeds coming again from Europe. Like there are many ways that I feel like the government can put more effort to sustainably. Right now, we should be focusing on forest regeneration for us to, if it took us 6 years, a whole 6 years, to climb up to 3%, and the climate crisis is only getting worse, how long will it take for us to get to 50, to get to even 15? How long, if we continue cutting down trees?
Michelle, even as you come into what she's talking about, she mentioned a very important bit of comparing Kenya to, for example, the Western countries. Where are we comparing Kenya and other African countries? Because during the Africa Climate Summit, these are talks that are going to be there. Different African leaders are going to stand on the platform and talk about how their own countries are doing, even as they prepare for the COP28. So before even these talks begin, where are we as a country comparing to other countries?
There are some African countries with high amount of areas of forest than ourselves. Mm-hmm. But forests are not because they are found in one country or not. There are reasons for that. Because a tree or a forest will establish where there is good climate for that. Like now, you see the high mountain forest, the big mountain there. They are limited in Kenya in the highlands, isn't it? Or in lower western like Kakamega, while the arid areas, there is no forest. But you go to Equatorial Guinea, you go to Gabon, that's in the area which we call it the equatorial climate. 365 days of rain, and much rain is there, deep soils, and so on. So in Kenya, being 2/3 is arid, you don't expect to have what we call high mountain forest in Kenya. And also there are difficult challenges of keeping forest in those dry areas, the shrubs which the woodlands like now in Kitui and so on. Mm-hmm. One is because of the poverty levels there, yeah? Right. Because much of this charcoal is coming from those areas and coming to Nairobi. It's not sustainable. But because of poverty and the other issues, those people are cutting those trees. And trying to plant those trees again, there are a lot of challenges. There is browsing by the goats. There is the climate itself. There is what we call the termites and so on. So Kenyans have faced those challenges, but I am glad the government is taking it head on. They want to plant those 15 billion seedlings, even outside the state forest. The state forest is just occupies about 8% of 2 million acres of land.
Right.
I can see you are looking for at your watch, but let me say that that this business of using forest for wood, I agree with that time. I don't know when was that. That paradigm shift, it has shifted from the preservation to conservation. And a good example is Karura Forest here.
Yeah.
Why was it established? One is to the clean air of Nairobi people.
Right.
Two, in 1941, mind you. Another one was blue gum, the eucalyptus are there for poles. But more important, to give wood to the urban natives, poor natives. If, like now, we are using it for tourism, and somebody want to say for tourism only. Is Nairobi short of the poor people now in Githogoro, in Mathare? So the forests are managed for multi-purpose use to satisfy from the poorest to the rich who want to walk his dog or her dog.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we call fairness and equity in sustainable forest management.
And because you mentioned, I was looking at my watch, we have about 4 minutes, give or take. And I believe this particular, matters of forest and the ban on logging is a whole other conversation that should really, take time.
Yeah.
Africa Climate Summit is around the corner. And even after that, we now will be focusing on COP28, flying all the way to Dubai for this. Hopefully, the last COP27, there were dashed hopes from poorer countries. They were hoping that richer countries will really pay their dues and pay actually the dues for the poorer countries. Your expectations, mostly for the Africa Climate Summit. I'll start with you, Tracy.
Thank you for that. My expectations for the Africa Climate Summit is, this shows hope. At Greenpeace Africa, we have this thing that we say, we tell all of our supporters, do not underestimate your power. For the first time ever, African people are coming together before the COP28, before the big conference. They're coming together to get our facts straight and have a united front. So there's a lot of hope in terms of that. And given that the focus is in renewable energy this time, and again, the person who's hosting Dubai, the president of COP28 is another fossil fuel giant. That's another story for another day. But yeah, I am really hopeful that this Africa Climate Summit will show that Africa is one. Africa can combat the climate crisis, and we will not take any nonsense or anything from anyone else. We are going to go to COP28 as a united front and ask for our climate funds and make sure that we defend our people and our nature.
You'll be there this time?
Fingers crossed. I'll see you there.
I'll also try to be there. Mufiri, as your last words, we have had a number of COPs as we live. Are we still going to have the same conversations at the end of COP28? Again, other dashed hopes, again, postponing conversations?
Now, first of all, with this summit, which is going to come in Nairobi, I think it's the right direction, because Africa may come together and maybe have clear roadmap of what they want from the COP this time. Maybe they are going to move there united, and they can have clear proposals and clear ideas on where they want to move.
Right.
And probably even African countries, they are not that extremely poor.
Okay.
They can bring some budget motivation and say a certain percent, each country can pool together some money in a certain pool, and then a certain percent of the GDP, and that money should be used specifically for projects which are related to the climate change. And you see sometimes, those people in the north, sometimes when you do good things, they join. A good example is when there were subsidies on maize in Malawi. by the president was the professor,
Yeah.
Begwa Mutharika, I assume.
Okay.
He started what he called a starter pack. You give each poor family some seeds of hybrid and then some fertilizer. And Malawi exported maize to Kenya after that.
Okay.
And then the World Bank joined. But initially they were saying no subsidies. Subsidies is a waste of money. So if Africa comes with a good start, and they don't take, the way I agree with you, they don't take a lot of nonsense, they become assertive, the others are going to come and they invest here. And also ourselves, we must put some small things right under there and so on to attract investment.
Right, some powerful and wise words
Yeah.
from Samuel Murithi, who's an ecological economist, and Tracy Mukheti.